The Ogres have had to climb out of a hole as deep and uninviting as the Great Maw. They've risen from one of the worst factions in the history of Total War Warhammer to a powerhouse of camp building, meat harvesting, and of course, girth. They're stuffed full of juicy mechanics, so let's dig in on just how to play them. But first, if you want this and all future videos ad-free, consider becoming a channel member for just $1 a month. You get early access to videos, no ads, and you support the channel. Now, let's get into the Ogres. First up, we have their racial mechanics, and first of all, we have ogre camps. Unlike other factions that either recruit their full roster from settlements or hordes, the ogres have something halfway in between. Their armies can construct ogre camps around the map, and this is where they can recruit their full roster. Camps obviously have buildings for gaining access to units, but they also contain buildings to empower nearby armies with extra abilities, income, recruitment capacity, and more. Camps can't move around like armies, but they can be packed up and redeployed anywhere you like, so you can keep them nearby to where you're playing to get the most value. They're also attackable like any army, so recruit an army to act as a garrison, and these cost no upkeep, so are fairly cheap to maintain. Lastly, they can choose one of two stances. Raiding enables replenishment and grants immunity to most attrition for nearby armies whilst generating raiding income like a normal army. And Camp does the same but drops the raiding income to increase growth and control locally. However, all of this requires funding, but instead of gold, ogre camps run on meat. This is the ogre's secondary currency, and it's earned on a per army basis. Winning battles, raiding, raising, sacking, and certain events will generate meat, and this is stored in that specific army's capacity. High levels of meat in an army grant it various stat bonuses, abilities, and reduced upkeep, whereas low levels do the opposite. The exact quantities of each tier vary depending on what you have in each army, so keep an eye on this whenever you recruit so you know what you're aiming for. Meat can also be used for offerings to the Great Maw. This is a set of 4 buffs you can place on armies at the cost of a constant meat upkeep every turn. You can have all 4 at once as long as you can afford the upkeep, so choose whatever you want whenever you need them. And don't forget to turn them off if you're not making use of them, otherwise you'll quickly run dry. As I said, meat is also how you upgrade camps, and to do that, you'll need to transfer some from your armies. To do this, you need to use the meat transfer menu, which allows you to select how much meat you want to send and how much gold it will cost. Be sure to leave some for your army, as these transfers are one way, and running out of meat is a surefire way to put an army in trouble. We also have bounties. As the ogres are mercenaries, it only makes sense you'll be able to take part in mercenary work over the course of the campaign. This comes in the form of sets of 3 missions that rotate in and out as they're completed or expire. These missions are normally hits where you need to take out a specific character or settlement, and completing them rewards you with gold, items, faction buffs, and improved relations with the issuer of the bounty. In my opinion, these are rarely worth the hassle, at least as far as gold is concerned. Even an early ogre army can cost 2,000 upkeep per turn, meaning even 20,000 gold is pushing it if it'll take you 10 turns to reach the destination, complete the mission, and get back to what you were doing. I'd focus more on the other wards for potential trade and alliances, items, and faction bonuses. That said, you don't miss out much on ignoring these, so don't feel like you're missing a trick if you forget about them. And lastly, we have big names. This is a super simple mechanic where each lord and hero has a collection of big names they can potentially make use of. To unlock them, you'll need to meet specific requirements for each name. These are normally quite minor objectives like winning a battle whilst making use of certain units or performing certain actions on the campaign map. Once completed, you'll simply unlock the name and the effects will start working. You can collect all names on every character, so it's well worth going out of your way to pick them up to stack tons of buffs across your faction. As for the Ogre's general playstyle, they are all about 2 things, meat and camps. You want to maximize meat income by any means necessary. This means battling massive armies full of juicy units ready to be processed into delicious meat. It also means having less of a focus on taking settlements and more on harvesting as much meat from them as you can. You want to use this meat to empower your armies with full stores and offerings to the Maw, whilst also sending as much as you can afford to your camps. The only constraint you'll run into when upgrading camps is meat, so if you overwhelm them with massive amounts, you can accelerate their growth to max size in no time, and unlock the full power of this fully operational ogre roster. I'd advise having 1 camp per army, and then 1 extra in reserve. This lets you rotate camps in and out as your armies roam the map. The short cooldown after packing up a camp and being able to place it means if you want 24/7 camp bonuses, you're going to need 1 waiting in reserve each time you pack it up. Outside of camps and meat, ogres sit firmly in the neutral alignment of factions, and whilst that does mean you can be friends with most other factions if you try hard enough, you can also end up at war with everyone if you're not careful. Make the most of trade and alliances to get some friends to ensure you don't end up taking on the world, unless that was your plan all along. Honestly, I'd ignore the bounties unless you can complete them without going out of your way. The gold is basically nothing once you do the maths, and unless it's a really good item, buff, or someone you want to be friends with, they just don't end up worth it. However, big names are well worth completing whenever possible, if for nothing else than having the joy of seeing all those boxes ticked and getting to call your characters by their exceedingly long full titles. Now we come to the different factions. First up we have Goldtooth, led by Greasus Goldtooth. His faction gains the Tyrant's Demands ability. His unique mechanic allows him to spend large amounts of gold on a large number of powerful actions. You can steal items from other lords to deck out your own characters, prevent movement and enable attrition for foreign armies, replenish the movement range of one of your own armies, increase the level of every unit in an army, siphon income from a foreign settlement, gain a large amount of meat, essentially delete all units in an army, and outright buy a settlement. These can be insanely powerful, so it's well worth building into his economy as much as possible to keep your options open. Aside from this, his status as Over-Tyrant earns him a lot of respect amongst the other ogres, granting him diplomatic bonuses. And as the trade lord, he's an expert at squeezing as much gold out of trade contracts as he can. His frugal habits also allow him to pick settlements clean whenever sacking and looting to maximize income. The Over-Tyrant, Trade Lord, etc. really does live up to his many titles. He is the best at buddying up with other ogres and other factions and making a mountain of gold from trade, so don't skimp on the diplomacy. With that gold you can abuse this Tyrant's Demands to get up to all kinds of shenanigans. This is a very simple mechanic, mechanically, but it really lets you do some truly insane stuff to turn the tide of anything in your favour. Mechanics aside, it's pretty much a Mountains of Morn collectathon going up and down, battling greenskins, undead and Nurgle aplenty. Buddy up with Cathay in the east, and at least you'll have one direction you don't need to keep such a close eye on. Next we have the Disciples of the Maw, led by Skrag the Slaughterer. His unique mechanic is the Offerings to the Maw. Skrag's faction gains bonuses based on how many simultaneous offerings to the Maw they have. This stacks from 1 to 10, and naturally, the higher you go, the more powerful the rewards in the form of cheaper spells, more meat, and various abilities for Skrag and his armies. It's pretty simple to use, just keep offerings going as much as possible for some fun rewards. Since it's mainly battle related, technically you can only turn them on whenever you're going to battle, but that ends up being a lot of micro, so it's up to you if you can be bothered to keep up with it. Aside from that, all of the offerings to the Maw rack up quite the meat bill, but not to worry, his butchering expertise allows him to scrape every scrap from the bone for an increased meat income. In his quest for infinite meat, he'll need help from other butchers and slaughtermasters, so it's lucky he knows how to pick the best and give them a head start upon recruitment. Lastly, he knows how to motivate his army with the promise of an epic feast, granting him increased movement range around the map. Skrag's chefing expertise means he knows just how much meat to toss in the maw to get the desired result, allowing him to save a ton of waste when offering. He's also an expert of the wily units in the roster, likely due to his time spent roaming the caves beneath the Mountains of Morn. When in his army, they're much cheaper, and Gorges gain devastating flanker, making them devastating flankers. More than anyone else, Skrag's campaign revolves around meat. You want to harvest as much as you possibly can and spam offerings to the Maw to reap some tasty bonuses, allowing you to make even more meat. This does make it seem a little bit like an MLM or a multi-level meat scheme. However, it does make him and his armies insanely powerful. The other M word in the faction is magic, and you want to make as much use of spellcasters as you can afford, not just because they're better right out the gate, but also for those cheaper spells. Mechanics aside, Skrag is in the north of the Southern Realms and is a little less diplomatic than Greasus. He can still work with most people if he really tries, it just might take a little bit more work to get them on side. It's a little easier to end up going against the world if you aren't careful, but worst case scenario, that's just more meat for the Maw. And lastly, we have the Maneaters, and they are led by... No, it's not Nelly Furtado, it's Golgfag Maneater. His mechanic is the mercenary contracts. Whilst all ogres are mercenaries, only one takes that title to its literal conclusion. Each turn you'll gain a choice of contracts, and each one will have a client, one or more targets and rewards in the form of gold and meat. You simply select the contract you want to take and get to work against the target settlements and armies. Upon starting a new contract, you can teleport your main army to any settlement owned by the client to help you hop around the map. Doing all this builds up client satisfaction, and upon reaching the required threshold, you'll be able to turn in the contract or keep going for increased gold. If you fail to meet the satisfaction requirement before the contract expires, you'll receive no reward, so make sure you finish contracts to get your monies and meat's worth. No matter how, once a contract is complete, you are able to make peace with the target, and all diplomatic penalties are passed on to the client. The price of his mercenary work is an inability to form alliances with other factions, though that does allow you to take on work from anyone you want against anyone you want. His entire faction is in it for the money and will fight harder when they know there's money on the line. His own army is trained to pick battlefields for valuables, extracting as much cash as possible from each and every battle. All Maneater units under his banner work for a reduced fee for the head of their tribe. Golgi is a bit of a weird faction since you really want to focus on being a one-man army and having a bunch of camps that you keep moving around. You can make another army, but they won't be able to teleport, so can't really help out with contracts if they are all over the map. You can take on some traditional wars for territory, but you don't really need it because of just how much cash you can make from contracts. If you're okay with this, then he's a riot and one of the best factions in the game for battling as many different factions as you can in as short a time as possible. If not, then you'll probably find him a little bit jank. Talking about his starting position is kind of pointless since you'll teleport away in moments once you clear out that first contract. So yeah, just build up 2 or 3 camps and rotate them in and out as you teleport around the map, so you always have that support wherever you go. Build up the biggest, baddest army you can, and go please your clients. And of course, enjoy that map hopping globe work. But what I want to know is, who's your favourite Ogre Lord? Let me know in the comments below. Like if you did, subscribe for more, and if you want more faction guides, then check out this one, all about the dwarves.